Let's see. The next question is about fasting. Nate, how do you know when adding in fasting is appropriate? For those who have most things dialed in, sleep, appropriate exercise, etc. Also, is doing a calorie deficit similar to the 5-2 diet as opposed to a normal daily deficit advisable?
Man. Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on this.
What's the 5-2 diet?
I think it's 5 days kind of normal caloric intake and then 2 days of low calorie intake, if I recall correctly. I apologize for my kind of waffling here, but it's just the fasting topic is kind of interesting. So as always, I like to, ask folks, where are you? What are you trying to do? Like, what's the goal? So why would one want to potentially fast? Some people choose to do some fasting because of some perceived benefits for fat loss, and it can, in fact, be helpful for fat loss. Some people who have, for whatever reasons, are noticing some consistently elevated blood glucose levels. They notice that with some amount of fasting or calorie restriction, that it kind of addresses that kind of creep in the blood glucose levels, and this arguably is kind of enhancing their metabolic flexibility. But it really depends. I also have seen a lot of people cook themselves by introducing intermittent fasting plus CrossFit plus hot yoga, and they eat 5 grams of carbs a month. And, usually the people who are willing to do intermittent fasting are the folks that are already like maxed out on everything that they're doing. And in the background of this, there's some discussion around fasting and ketogenic diets and health and longevity, and that's all great. I think that there's laudable characteristics around that, but there's a great paper, and I will stick it in the show notes, but the title of something like caloric restriction does not improve longevity in all species and is unlikely to do so in humans. And they go through and kind of unpack all of the calorie restriction literature, and it's worth noting, and very, very few people give airplay to this, but not all critters benefit from calorie restriction. And to the degree that we've seen calorie restriction in fasting benefit lab animals, it seems to be undoing one problem, and that is the horrible chow that is fed to the animals. And there's a very clear understanding that consistent calorie restriction for free living animals living out in nature as they should is almost a guarantee of a death sentence. Like it does not enhance longevity. So these calorie restriction, investigations and fasting investigations are really undoing the damage of like a zoo animal or a zoo human kind of scenario. So just think about that for a minute. So Nate said, for those who have most things dialed in, sleep, appropriate exercise, etc. So what we have in that scenario, in theory, assuming that we're kind of in this ancestral health kind of template, we have someone that is not quite living that zoo human experience. Like, they're not drinking soda day in, day out. They're probably not eating a ton of refined food. Maybe they're going to bed at a reasonable hour, and they're kind of circadian and trained. They're exercising in a way that challenges them but doesn't bury them. And it is a great question as to whether or not anything that they do above and beyond that is really going to help with regards to performance, health, and longevity, And again, we don't know specifically why Nate would want to introduce this stuff. So I guess it's one of those things where I would make the argument that if someone eats a low palatability, nutrient-dense diet, they go to bed reasonably early, they wear their blue blockers in the evening, they get some good exercise, they have meaningful relationships, their gut health appears to be pretty good.
Sun on their body.
They get sun on their body. It's questionable whether or not much more is going to benefit this individual. Now, we could make an argument that maybe eat your breakfast at 9 or 10 a.m. and then try to make dinner around 4 or 5, 6 p.m. and then you're getting some compressed feeding window time in there, and maybe you make that out of 2 meals or possibly 3. Like, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of variability there. But I think at that point, compared to just focusing on food quality and the sun on your skin and all that stuff, like, there really isn't a lot of upside left. Mm-hmm. But there is the potential of turning that into a stress that could be problematic at that point. So I know that's a long-winded, it seems like a really simple thing of like, yeah, man, throw in the fasting, but it's
Or maybe just reserve it for like a day where you're traveling and you have really poor
Right.
options when it comes to, you
right,
know,
which is
food.
definitely what I do. I've gotten to where I generally just don't eat or don't eat much when I travel. I might get a meal in, and sometimes I don't get one in at all.
Right.